billionaire elite class are in absolute panic mode right now. Venture capitalist Ken Griffin claimed that tax the rich is a hateful, vile expression that, get this, is just as bad as a racial slur. Sam Altman publicly posted a family photo of his husband and son to try and garner some public sympathy after someone nearly lit his house on fire. Public anger erupted and turned the Met Gala into an absolute living hell for the billionaires who funded it. And in their last-ditch ultimate effort to try and save themselves, they send their ultimate evil final boss, Jeff Bezos, onto CNBC to do an extended 30-minute interview to try and save face. And after watching it, I gotta say, it can only be described as full-on panic mode and damage control. Now, I'm gonna do something a bit different for this video. We could just roast them, destroy them, prove how insanely out of touch they are, and don't get me wrong, there's definitely always gonna be a bit of that. But I actually did my best to be fair and objective here, and listen to the whole interview in good faith. And we're gonna analyze it from a pure, rational, and logical economic standpoint here. Spoiler alert, almost everything he said is still totally wrong and utterly delusional, as you'd expect. But anyways, let's get into it. Now, right off the bat, you can already tell that Jeff has a pretty good PR optics team here. He sets up the interview to be in a loud, bustling room resembling an Amazon warehouse to make it look like he's actually down to earth and right there with the workers. And obviously, we all know it's bullshit. I mean, we all know he works in a fancy ivory office somewhere, and he's never spent a single day working with his employees in the warehouse. But he does play these optics games pretty well here. Just be aware of all these subtle little tricks all these billionaire elites love to do. Now, the CNBC interviewer immediately starts off by asking him the tough question on everyone's mind. Billionaire wealth has surged to absurd levels while the rest of us struggle to barely afford rent and groceries. What is going on here? This was his answer.
So you have a bunch of people in this country who are doing really well, but you also have a bunch of people in this country who are struggling to pay rent, groceries. Politicians are using the kind of age-old technique. So there's this tale of two economies, and they're using this age-old technique of, picking a villain and pointing fingers. But the problem is that doesn't solve anything. And so, if you want to help the group of people who are struggling, you have to figure out real root causes and solutions, and that takes skill. It's like the way if we have a problem at Amazon, the way we would fix it is we would go in and we'd do the 5 whys and we'd try to get to a root cause. We'd try to find a root fix. And then when we fix it at the root, you're fixing it forever. It's a real solution. And what we don't do, because it doesn't work, is just point fingers and blame people. It might feel good for 10 seconds, but doesn't accomplish anything.
Right away, you can already tell his body language and demeanor is pretty fidgety here. He's choosing his words very carefully, and yet the delusion keeps slipping through. His answer basically reflects a pretty common capitalist talking point the rich love to use. Basically, that him being rich doesn't negatively impact anyone else, and that in fact he's used his wealth to create jobs and wealth for others. The classic trickle down, a rising tide lifts all boats argument. And the problem with this argument is that it's just mostly wrong. It is true that Amazon has created jobs. Not very good ones to say the least, but they've technically created over 1 million jobs in the US. The problem, however, is that in the process of doing so, it's destroyed countless more good jobs from good brick and mortar shopping mall retail jobs that used to exist before Amazon took over. Those jobs, by the way, in the 90s and early 2000s were very decent paying jobs that paid everyone a comfortable living wage and that you didn't need a college degree for. All of them replaced by menial, repetitive, and sometimes downright dangerous Amazon warehouse jobs that don't even pay you enough for food, with a good percentage of Amazon workers on food stamps. And this is a perfect example of elite egoism and ignorance. It's not even intentional evil necessarily in this instance, though they probably are evil too, but I think it's more just an issue of tunnel vision than anything else. They're so tunnel vision on creating an egotistical, godlike vision for themselves that they only see the jobs they created and not the many more they destroyed. Now, this is a perfect segue into the next question. You see, the anti-AI backlash has reached an absolute boiling point right now. AI CEOs are getting targeted, data centers are being attacked, and it's cost thousands of people either losing their jobs or not even being able to get their first entry-level job to begin with. And now, because their own personal safety is at risk, they're finally changing their tune. Just a few months ago, Amazon was publicly and almost proudly announcing all their massive tens of thousands of AI layoffs. But now that the backlash has reached a fever pitch, suddenly they're on damage control duty. Now Jeff Bezos is making the classic, predictable, but AI will create jobs too argument.
And they are saying, oh my God, there are going to be no more radiologists because AI can read x-rays better than a radiologist can. And there are going to be no more software engineers because AI can program better than a software engineer can. These people are wrong. So what's really going to happen is that it's going to elevate all of these people. And it's like you've been digging, let's say you're a software engineer. Right. The analogy I can give you is you've been digging out a basement for your house with a shovel. And somebody's about to hand you a bulldozer. You should be so happy.
Hey guys, relax, this is not an ad. I just wanted to say thanks so much for helping us finally hit 50,000 subscribers. I truly believe we're in the middle of a historical, transformative Gen Z revolution right now, and we plan to cover it every step of the way. So if you're new here and enjoying this content, definitely consider subscribing and joining us as we witness history together. So, right off the bat, this answer was pretty easily refuted in the comment section by someone who had the basic common sense to say out loud what all of us were thinking. If you have a bulldozer, you still replace 9 jobs of the people who used to have shovels. This idea that AI will create jobs too, so far is nothing more than cope with no evidence to show for it. I'm not totally closed-minded to the idea that maybe one day it could. But it's really hard to see it, and guess what? We still have to eat and live until this magical day arrives. So far, however, all the current evidence we have has shown that it hasn't created anywhere near as many jobs as it's displaced. We all know how horrible the environmental and economical impact of AI data centers has been, polluting the air, consuming ridiculously unethical amounts of water right now, especially considering we're already facing a water shortage, and of course, driving up everyone's energy bills to unheard of unsustainable levels. Now, the justification for all this is that these AI data centers will also create jobs, the usual classic billionaire delusion that they're job creators resurfacing again. When we look at the actual reports, however, we see that these massive AI data centers only create 20 to 50, yes, 20 to 50 jobs. Only one job created for every $13 million spent. And the reason they create so few jobs is perhaps ironically best explained by Google's AI itself. AI data centers are notorious for consuming massive amounts of power while creating very few permanent operational jobs. On average, a standard hyperscale facility requires only 20 to 50 full-time staff to operate, functioning essentially as skeleton crews of security personnel, IT experts, and specialized technicians. Why are operational jobs so scarce? Data centers are heavily automated. Racks of thousands of servers running artificial intelligence models require minimal human interaction once they are properly configured and provisioned. Facilities rely on highly centralized monitoring and software to manage operations. So, according to the very direct source itself, not only is it a provable fact that AI is not creating anywhere near enough jobs, the reason it's not creating new jobs is exactly what we all suspected. The reason it's fundamentally different from the Industrial Revolution or any other historical examples people like to bring up. Once it's set up and properly configured, it simply requires very little human interaction. I'm not one of those guys who's a total anti-AI Luddite. I'm not against AI inherently, but I am absolutely against the way it's being deployed and used right now by this current billionaire class. In the early days of AI, they were all talking about ending poverty, UBI, making everyone wealthy. And now all they talk about is how they're using it to lay off workers. They've completely abandoned their original mission, where they at least pretended to be benevolent, and now have defaulted to the classic neoliberal cope of, but AI will create jobs too, even though all the actual current evidence suggests otherwise. Now, as I said in the beginning, I'm actually going to be fair to Bezos here. The next thing he says is probably the most sensible thing he said in the whole interview, or maybe least delusional is a better way to put it than most sensible. But here's what he said when it comes to the issue of taxes and affordability for the working class.
I started thinking about this and doing some research. A nurse in Queens who makes $75,000 a year pays more than $12,000 a year in taxes. Does that really make sense? So people talk about making the tax system more progressive. How about we start by having the nurse in Queens not pay taxes? Why is a nurse in Queens who makes $75,000 a year paying more than $1,000 a month in taxes? That's $1,000 a month that could help with rent or groceries or anything. And so, and by the way, do you know what that all adds up to? The bottom half of income earners in this country pay only 3% of the taxes. So, it's only 3%. We can find 3%. So we don't have, it's a small amount of money for the government, that. And really, and the more I thought about it, to me, it's kind of absurd that we're doing this. We shouldn't be asking this nurse in Queens to send money to Washington. They should be sending her an apology.
Now, I think this is the best thing he said the entire interview, and it's something we can all agree on. The problem, however, is, as you'll soon see, it doesn't come anywhere close to actually fully addressing the issue. Going back to Bezos' own example of the nurse in Queens making $75,000 a year here, it's absolutely true that in this economy, an extra $12,000 per year or $1,000 per month is a big deal. Heck, it feels like every single dollar counts in this economy. But while it is a good starting point, it unfortunately still doesn't come anywhere close to actually solving the problem. If, let's say, we leave this $75,000 yearly nurse salary totally untaxed, then we divide $75,000 into 12 months, we get a figure of $6,250 per month, which is an improvement from the $5,250 she gets right now. But everybody knows in order to actually be able to afford to live, you need to be earning at least 2.5 to 3 times the cost of rent. This isn't my figure, by the way. It's a standard requirement for most landlords themselves. Now, the average rent in NYC costs over $4,000 a month, meaning this nurse making $75,000, even without taxes, isn't coming anywhere close to being able to afford to live. And before delusional boomers chime in the comments, no, if you're a nurse who's gone to school, acquired skills, worked hard for a middle-class salary, you should not have to live with a roommate, period. Now, the interviewer did a good job pressing Jeff Bezos on this. It certainly sounds good that you claim you want the working class to pay less taxes, but then are you willing to pay more to make up for that shortfall then? To which he gave a pretty evasive non-answer, almost like a politician.
It's certainly a perfectly valid policy debate to say, do we want an even more progressive tax system? So, the line that gets quoted all the time is, the wealthy should pay their fair share. Right. And we can argue about what the fair share is. That's a policy debate. That's okay. But the vilification is the thing that's just the distraction. And by the way, if you really are being honest about it, we don't have a revenue problem in this country. We already have the most progressive tax system in the world. The top 1% of taxpayers pay 40% of all the tax revenue. The bottom half pay only 3%. We have already, and I think it should be 0. I don't think it should be 3%. I think it should be 0. So we'd be making it more progressive that way. We actually have a spending problem, and that's a skills issue.
Now, it's at this point where, in my opinion, even trying my best to be fair to him here, this whole damage control interview just falls flat on its face, and you start to see all the problems being exposed, whether it's a capitalist billionaire or one of the many capitalist politicians on either side they've bought out. The typical worn-out rehashed solution they've been using since the 1970s is always tax cuts. Tax cuts are the magic silver bullet solution that will solve all our economic problems. And at this point, it just feels more of a deflection than anything else, more of a tactic to avoid personal responsibility than a serious policy proposal. The reason I know it's a deflection is because Bezos doesn't work in the government and doesn't have any direct control over tax policy, thank God. And so by convincing you this issue is all about taxes, he can continue to just blame it on the government instead of taking personal accountability. But here's one thing that would instantly and immediately solve the problem. Jeff Bezos actually paying his workers more. Jeff Bezos is one of the largest employers in America, and unlike tax policy in Washington, he could literally snap his fingers and decide he wants to pay his over 1 million Amazon employees more money. And this would actually go a long way towards solving the problem. And it's just funny how he never mentions this as a potential solution, even though it's blatantly obvious to everyone. Anything involving him paying more, whether it's paying more in tax or paying his workers more, he deflects, dodges, and avoids, and tries to simplify it down to a government taxes issue, which, as we just mathematically proved, wouldn't come even close to solving the problem. Now, this isn't even to mention the massive amounts of people who are unemployed and can't even find jobs in the first place with how bad the job market is thanks to Jeff Bezos' AI layoffs. Tax cuts obviously wouldn't help anyone who doesn't even have a job anymore in the first place. So in conclusion, I think we're really starting to get somewhere, guys. I really do. As a general observation, you can see in his body language, he was panicking and trembling pretty bad throughout the whole interview, along with a lot of his billionaire elite buddies right now. The pressure is starting to get to them. And thanks to you, we're finally starting to force some real positive changes in the right direction. We just need to keep the pressure on, keep the conversation going, and I have no doubt that sooner or later, we're going to change the world.